Welcome to Breaking Queen Voice. I am Alexis, and I am the head coach and founder of Project Pageantry. I am a professional communications writer and marketing manager by trade. I own a communications company called Sprig Communications, where I work primarily with healthcare groups and nonprofits with their communications and marketing. But it started with queening. As so many rodeo queens do, I went directly from public speaking to writing and communicating professionally. You can see little Alexis there at the podium. That wasn't my first contest I ever competed at, but it was the first year I competed. And this was the first contest that I ever earned a title. I started rodeo queening at the age of 9. My mom thought I was an extra shy kid, and so she decided she was going to fix that by putting me in front of people. I had a love for horses. I started 4-H when I was 8 doing horse 4-H. And so she combined the two, my horse love with my desire, or her desire for me to become more comfortable with people. I continued to compete for a number of years. Most notably, as an adult, my titles included the Call the Night Rodeo Queen in 2012, and then I was first runner-up at the 2020 or 2013 Miss Rodeo Idaho pageant, where I won appearance and speech, the coveted speech award. I have since then coached and written speeches for girls who have won speech at Miss Rodeo Idaho. I've coached 2 young ladies to the top 10 at Miss Rodeo America pageant. And most recently, I coached last year's 2026 Miss Rodeo America speech winner, and she was also a Miss Rodeo Idaho. As I mentioned, I am a professional in content and communications. I started out in the horse industry. So rather than going to Miss Rodeo Idaho again after my first runner-up year in 2013, I had a job opportunity with the AQHA after graduating, and I moved there in August to Amarillo, Texas. And then from there, I went on to write as a member of the staff at Horse and Rider magazine, and then have since freelanced for Horse and Rider, the National Rein Horse Association, Rainer magazine, American Cowboy, and Mental Athletics, which you won't recognize that logo necessarily in the middle. They're one of my current clients. I support Gil with marketing and communications, and he does mental coaching and mindset coaching for showing, most notably NRHA and Rainers, but he works with all sorts of folks. So I stayed closely connected to the horse industry as a professional, as well as a former rodeo queen. Today, we are going to be talking about an area that is of big concern when we come to think about speech and speech competition for rodeo queen contests, which is queen voice. And this is the phenomenon where somehow, even though we all sound differently when we're talking one-on-one, when we get on stage, we all sound the same. And it happens not because anybody is doing wrong. It comes from good intentions, where we see young ladies have success in the speech portion of the contest, and then girls who are learning or want to get better model what they see as successful. And so we end up following this very consistent pattern of speaking, where typically the sentences are of the same length. So maybe 7 words or 5 words. It always has a predictable pattern, which kind of creates this sing-songy pattern, because everything is predictable, sort of like a nursery rhyme. The pitch follows the same pattern in each sentence. Typically it goes up and then goes down. There's a slight pause at the beginning of every introductory phrase. And I've noticed this in my practice with rodeo queens recently, is that when we're memorizing speeches, there's typically a, "Hi, my name is Alexis," pause, and then whatever follows the comma is, we say that normally, but there tends to be a pause at the beginning of that second part of a sentence. The pace never changes. So each word to the next, each sentence to the next is a predictable cadence. And then it sounds too memorized, not natural. And there's a way that we're going to talk about this later. How do we memorize so that we go from being totally off the cuff, where I don't have my content memorized, and being too rehearsed, where I sound like I'm performing or in front of an audience for a play versus a speech. I really want to talk about this concept of the speaker's voice as an instrument, right? When we're creating music, some someone might play the piano, they might play the guitar, they might use their voice to create sound. But the reason we like music is it's appealing. And so I want you to think about your voice as your instrument to create this like performance or this song that we all can appreciate. The context is speaking, but there's a lot of parallels between performing in music and performing on stage for a speech. So if you think about your voice as being that instrument, you can start to fine tune how you are playing your instrument so that your speech becomes better. And the way we can do that is through this concept of the 5 P's of public speaking, which are pace, pitch, pause, projection, and passion. And I'm going to get into what those are. Pace, as you would expect, this is the speed that you talk at. So when you think about reining, as an example, a lot of the patterns that we do in horsemanship come from reining, the discipline. And if you think about the best reiners, or the ones you enjoy watching the most, are the ones that have a lot of contrast between their circles, right? Big fast is big fast. Small slow is small and slow. And that transition between the two is very dramatic, which heightens the difficulty level. And you can follow that same pattern or that same model in your public speaking. Your pitch is the expression or emotion you use in your voice. So if we think about rodeo queens, typically this goes up or this goes down, but it's essentially the where you're at in terms of in relation to your normal talking voice. So this is my normal talking voice. This is when I go up. This is when I go down, and that is pitch. Pause is where you give your words room to breathe, and this is where you isolate moments that matter and let the audience either catch up to what you're saying or really home in on something that's very important about what you're saying. Your projection is about reaching the back of the room. Whether you have a mic or you don't in your contest, we need to be speaking with confidence and speaking from our diaphragm instead of speaking from our head voice. I think we've all experienced listening to the national anthem where someone is really reaching and straining versus really in their range where they're most powerful in their voice. And you can tell the difference. That's projection. Passion is, do you believe what you say? You can think about this as conviction as well, but this could also be a way for you to convey emotion, right? Are you excited? And is that coming through in what you're saying? Are you upset or disgruntled or uncomfortable? Whatever the emotion you're trying to convey, that's going to come across in your passion. Now let's get into, we can't miss, we've got the 5 P's, but the content is sometimes where this originates from. We can take a piece of content and apply the 5 P's to create a very dynamic speech. But the best way to do it is from the beginning when you sit down to write. So if we know that sentences of a similar length create a consistent cadence, where it's like house music here in this example, where it's like boom, boof, 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 boof in the background, it's all a consistent cadence. We can start to do something about that in our writing. So instead of having our sentences all seven words, for example, let's make some of them 10. Let's make some of them 14. Maybe it's a long sentence. Let's make them 1 or 2 words in a sentence so that we can add emphasis there. And that creates either length or makes our sentences sharp and punchy. And you want your important words to land. So there are going to be moments where you're trying to make a point in your speech, and adding those in so that you have moments where you can create pause and cause people to think from the beginning, not just adding vocal variety through those 5 P's, but being intentional about it when you're writing it, improves your phrasing to make it even easier to have the presentation that you're looking for. And then add intentional variety. Write it in before you memorize it. The girls who work with me are often surprised when I say, okay, we've written the thing. And they said, okay, I'm going to start memorizing. And I say, no, wait, let's do it together. And why I do that is because I want to memorize these speeches as we want to say them and not memorize the words and then add them later, because it becomes much more difficult to make that emphasis, automatic, right? It's easier to default back to our memorization. So if we memorize them with intentional variety first, we're more likely to have intentional variety when we get up on stage. So let's get into the details. Like, let's go a little bit deeper on those 5 Ps. So pacing, which is the pace, right? The speed. Here are some ways you can add pacing into your speech if you're not sure how to do that. So record yourself or snap to your own beat. Record yourself because you're going to be able to see and listen to your pace when you're watching in a different way than when you're listening to yourself speak or when someone else is listening to you speak. I like to snap. Actually, I like to clap. I like to clap along, especially when girls are adding unnecessary pauses, like that introductory phrase. You can actually start speaking like a metronome to your clapping, record yourself and snap to your own beat. And then you can add variety, record yourself and snap to your own beat. So if I were to write that on a sheet of music, for those not musically inclined, you can ignore me here, but if I were writing that sheet on a music, it wouldn't just be like quarter, 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 quarter. It would be record yourself, quarter, quarter, and 1, 2, snap to your own beat, right? And so if you think about adding those notes into your pace, it can really help you understand when you're going to go fast and speed up. And you'll notice, like, when you're talking to someone, you're going to do this automatically. Like if I'm excited about something and I'm telling my mom or I'm telling my husband or I'm telling my best friend about something cool that happened, I'm automatically going to speed up. I want to tell you all of this stuff really quickly. Can't wait to get it out. And so bringing that pace into your speaking, whether that's speeding up to show excitement or slowing down to show weight, is going to create dynamics in your public speaking. Enough on that. So pitch I mentioned is where we add emphasis going up and down in relation to our normal voice. So most speakers, most rodeo queens start high and then they go down. So today, or hi, my name is Alexis, and today I'm going to tell you about blah. So that predictable pattern of your pitch is what creates this sort of like monotonous sing-song voice, like twinkle, twinkle, little star. It's like the same pitch pattern over and over again. Change it. Be intentional about it. Try going low to high. Try going low and then high and then low again. Add some variety to your sentence, the pitch in your sentence, so that it makes it sound musical and it's interesting to listen to rather than robotic, that everything follows the same pattern. The pause. This is all about more words heard, not said. So Mark Twain has this quote, but it's not necessarily how quickly we can get the words out, how many words we can spew and show our knowledge. It's about, are our words heard and what are the weight of those words? Often you can say fewer words and have more depth and meaning or more understanding just based off of the fact of where you're adding emphasis, right? We've been around those people that are like, a man a few words or a woman a few words. And the reason is when they do talk, you really listen because whatever they have to say is important. And that's what some of this pausing can do, is that adding weight to your words makes them more memorable. So you can isolate the words. You can bring attention to something that's important that's going to come next and allow the audience to absorb something before you move on to the next thing. Think about like a rhetorical question. Have you ever done something so hard that you question what you were doing? Pause. Give them a second to think about it. That was probably not the best example, but like think about a time where you did something so hard that you surprised yourself. Let them think about it and then keep going, right? And so that creates a hook and adds some weight. It's not just empty space. A lot of times we like to fill the empty space with like or yeah, but pauses are not that. It's not an opportunity to add a filler word. It's an intentional pause to empty space to create energy. Okay. I'm not going to get into projection and passion necessarily, just because we've touched on those briefly in the description, and some of those are best explored when you're doing the exercises. But I like to go through sample readings and practice drills when I'm working with girls, because I think it's easier to master these skills outside of the context of your speech. So when we're working with content that we're very familiar with, whether it be a nursery rhyme or a book, it's a lot easier to add these in than it is when you're already trying to memorize a speech. It's like asking your brain to do double duty. I need you to memorize this while also doing this. So what I like to start with, and this is a good exercise for you to do at home, is to practice these techniques outside of the context of your speech. And I use Twinkle Twinkle Little Star with every girl I work with, and they think it's ridiculous, but it's because there's a predictable pattern. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. You hear the pace. Da 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 da. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. Pause. How I wonder what you are. Pause. Up above the world so high. Pitch. Like a diamond in the sky. Pitch down. So you could hear the things in there if you know what you're listening to. And so challenge yourself to go through different paces. Do this fast. Do this slow. Change your pitch throughout. Instead of twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are, right? It sounds very different. So do that when you're practicing. Okay, memorizing and making it feel natural. This is how we go from I'm totally winging it, or I totally sound rehearsed, to I am authentically speaking as myself, and that comes across as if I'm not memorized, but this is totally memorized. And there are some stages to this. 3 stages. The first is you're learning the words. So this is where you're like using your piece of paper, you're writing your vocal variety in so that you can practice it like that. You're writing go up, go down, pause here, all of that. This is where you're simply learning your vocal variety with your words. And I like to think about practicing like we want to perform, not just practicing. There's a Vince Lombardi quote that says, perfect practice makes perfect. And while I think that can go too far, I think there's some truth in that, where it's not necessarily about we have to be perfect every time, but it's the seeking perfection or seeking the best version of this through our practice, and not just going through the practice itself, because we want to perform at our best. So we practice at our best. And this shows up in like, I can hear it when girls are like, oh, I spent a lot of time memorizing this in the car or while I was riding my horse, because you're memorizing the words, but you're not necessarily saying the words as you want to in that vocal variety. You're saying it just to get through the words, and your mind is also elsewhere. So that's okay in this first stage. When we get to the second stage, we've got it memorized, but it can feel a little bit like too over the top, right? You're like, oh, I sound like I'm at like a low rate drama production, right? Where I'm like excessive emotion or excessive pausing. And some of that has to do with not feeling totally comfortable with how you've memorized it, and not fully having adopted what you've said, right? We want our content to feel authentically ours and to have conviction about it. Like, this is what I really believe. It's not just like, Alexis told me to do this, so I'm doing it. When you make the transition from someone told me to say it this way, and so that's how I say it, to I'm saying it this way because I really believe it's important and you need to listen to me, that's where it starts to feel natural and authentic. So this transition between too rehearsed and natural is sometimes where that queen voice comes in. You can have a predictable cadence, you can have a predictable pitch, but if you haven't fully integrated what your words are and your whole speech and your content into you, no matter what, it is still going to come across as rehearsed or fake. Does that make sense? I mentioned this already. Practice like you want to perform. It isn't about remembering the words, it's owning the message so delivery flows freely. And here are some ways that you can practice so that you can go from stage 2 to stage 3. So stand up. Every run through should happen on your feet. Don't practice sitting at your desk. Don't practice on your horse. So there's a certain point where you have to get to the point where You are completely mimicking the environment that you're going to compete in. I mentioned the 2026 speech winner. We didn't practice our entire year, or really it was the last few months that we were really going hard, but we didn't practice every single time with her on her feet, in her outfits, all of that stuff. But you want to create and simulate that competitive environment so that it's not new when you step up on that stage. So you better believe that in the weeks leading up to America, she was practicing in the boots that she's going to wear for speech. She was practicing holding her Bucks bag item and figuring out how to maneuver around it. She was practicing in her chaps for her chap outfit to ensure that she was able to move her legs and show the chap and like do that automatically without having to worry like, oh, my chap is like twisted and they can't actually see it. So do the same thing for yourself. If it's good enough for Miss Rodeo America contestants, it's good enough for you. You can practice in the same way that you want to perform and recreate that environment. Full runs only. This happens a lot in stage 1 to 2 where you have to go back to the beginning and go over and over again. Instead of doing that, memorize your content in chunks, and then you can build and build and build. So you feel that confidence of going from the beginning, but you need to be able to start basically anywhere in your speech and not be thrown off. I should be able to interrupt you to tell you to look somewhere or pause or move your feet, fix your feet, put your shoulders back, whatever the cue is. I should be able to interrupt you and you can keep going past that point. It's not going to totally derail you and you have to start back at the beginning. I already mentioned the simulated competition conditions, dressed time with an audience, bring in your neighbor, bring in some rodeo queen friends who can put a little bit of pressure on you so that the first time you're feeling pressure isn't on stage. That'll make a big difference. Record everything. There's one thing to say it, and you've listened to like a voicemail and you're like, do I really sound like that? Same thing. Record yourself because you want to hear, do I really sound like that? Is that how I want to sound? Or do I need to make adjustments? Or you might hear like, oh, that's what my mom or my coach or someone was trying to tell me that I was doing there. Now that I can see it and I can hear it, I can make the change. But sometimes we need that extra cue. So I encourage you anytime you're practicing to record yourself and then vary your run-throughs. My mom has been coaching for a really long time. She's a communications professor. She has coached rodeo queen. She coached me when I was a rodeo queen, and she has coached speech and debate students that have been very successful. And she's like, I make them do it in accents. I make them do it, in crazy voices because I want to break the ice and break the monotony of it. And I want to know that they know it so completely that they can focus on something completely different, like having an Australian accent and not lose any of the content. Okay, you're there when you've gone from 2 to 3, when you start to see these things. You can pause mid-sentence, someone can interrupt you and it doesn't throw you off. You notice the room and can respond to it. You can make eye contact intentionally across the room. You can respond to how people are listening or not listening and make adjustments. You could say it in a different way and say it right. This is the accents. You could say it differently. I could give you a cue. Actually, I think we need to change that. We need to go up there, or you need to sound more like you're asking a question, and you can do that. It feels less like you're reciting it and more like you're telling it. Do you have conviction and passion? Can I tell that you really mean what you're saying, or are you just saying it because that's how I told you to say it, or that's how you think you should say it? And then someone in the room leans in, and this doesn't have to just be someone leaning in, but it's, can you watch your audience? Can you respond to the room? And can you see that they're engaging with your content? They're not just listening to another rodeo queen voice. They're actually invested in what you're saying. They're smiling. They're leaning in. They're showing in their body language. They're engaged with what you're saying. And this doesn't have to just be in competition. This could be in practice too. If you're practicing in front of an audience, read your audience. And if something isn't hitting, like figure out how you can, if the joke isn't landing and you're intending to have a joke, like what do you need to do in your vocal variety? Do you need to pause and give them a chance to catch up? Do you need to pitch up? What do you need to do to make that joke land? And so your audience can be a good way of helping you figure out where your vocal variety needs to be. Okay. this is where we get into the what do I do now? I have all of this information. So I went through the 5 Ps. I talked about practicing to perform and how we do that. I talked about the stages of memorization so that you can feel comfortable in the wheels falling off at stage 2 and you don't feel quite ready, and how you can persevere to stage 3. But there's more to it than that, right? We didn't touch on the content and how you structure that. We didn't touch on how you walk and move across the stage. And we didn't touch on the types of content that you need to build to feel ready for a speech competition. All of that is in the Rodeo Queen Public Speaking Handbook, which you can find at the website projectpageantry.com. This workbook is where I start with every single girl that I'm coaching, and it's included in all of my coaching packages for a reason, because I want them to come into it knowledgeable about the concepts that we need to cover to become good speakers. And if you think about public speaking as a lifelong skill, I'm coming to this after starting as a rodeo queen, not to age myself, but more than 20 years ago. And to where I am now, it's a lifelong skill that you're building. And so invest like it's a lifelong skill. This workbook can help you work on those areas beyond the 5 Ps and what we've talked about today with the vocal variety. But this is the thing that I'm most excited to introduce, which is Project Pageantry Academy. This, you can consider the first session of Project Pageantry Academy. And it's a series of webinars built to help you be more prepared no matter where you're competing and no matter what level you're competing. So I noticed something happen when I was a rodeo queen, where resources came when you knew somebody, and hopefully you are fortunate enough to get really good advice from a former rodeo queen or a former rodeo queen's mom or someone who you trust that's giving you solid advice. But not everybody has that. And I was fortunate enough to live in a state where we had a relatively strong state program. And so there were some clinics, local clinics available. And I was within driving distance of some pretty good clinics. I went to boot camp when I was the Call Night Rodeo Queen, which they paused for a while and they restarted. But I was able to really see, like, what does it take to get to the next level and how can I get some really good coaching? But that isn't accessible to everybody. And often we hire coaches who are just focused on one area, but just like pageants aren't made or broken off of speech or off of horsemanship, you need to be a well-rounded competitor to be successful long-term. And so this is why I introduced the concept of Project Pageantry, where it's essentially an online clinic accessible to girls all over the nation of every level, where we can bring in coaches across disciplines to create a complete competitor. So I'll be bringing in expert guests who are pro rodeo athletes who have been there, done this. They've competed at the PRCA. They've competed at their local level, for example, and they know their sport inside and out, and they're going to help you understand their sport inside and out. It's one thing to be like, I read the rule book and this is what it says. It's another thing to fully understand from a first person account of, like, what is it like to get on a bucking horse? What is some of the language or lingo that I should care about? Just like rodeo queening, there's so much secret code once you get into it. All of these areas have secret code once you get into it that you can learn from people who are actually experts and practitioners of these areas. You're going to hear from veterinarians. You're going to hear from rodeo queen coaches who have had success at the level that you want to compete at in the areas that you want to compete at, whether that's be the written knowledge area or whether that be horsemanship or whether that be public speaking. I'm going to bring in media personnel and help you understand how can you be a good representative once you've won the title, so that you can make your organization proud and really stand out in the job and build some fantastic skills along the way. And I'm going to bring in industry experts from other areas that impact rodeo queening, photographers, makeup artists, hairstylists, right? There are all of these other areas where we need to have mastery so that we can be a complete competitor. So this is an opportunity for girls across the nation to join wherever they're at, no matter if you have a clinic up the road or a coach up the road or not. You can join and get some really good guidance in your journey. So Academy will be paid. So events like this first event I hosted to get people interested in this concept and to see how it went. But I'm going to be offering these as online clinics, just like you would go to a clinic and pay for that. And the reason mostly is so that I can compensate speakers, right? I want the best of the best to be able to share their time with you. And so I want to attract the best by giving them an opportunity to earn some compensation while they're speaking to you. It allows me to bring the best of the best across all of these industries. It helps me support quality content, make sure that these sessions are quality, make sure that you are informed of them so you're not missing any opportunities, and just continue to make this community the best version possible. And I really do want it to be a community. There's a lot of folks across the nation who we can learn from. If you're in Idaho, you may not know someone in Florida, but you have something that you can offer them, or they have something or insight that they can offer you. And so I want to create a community where it feels more supportive, because we are all working our booties off to compete at whatever level we're at. Nobody's showing up just to show up. Everybody is working hard. And I want us to start recognizing that work and supporting one another and being able to cheer for one another, even though we are wanting to win and preparing like we want to win. You can do both, and you can have both. We can work together and build each other up and learn alongside each other, even if we compete fiercely. So that said, each session from here on out will be $20 per session. And this is for folks who maybe want to select the sessions that they find most interesting, whether that's something that they want to learn more about, they're really interested, or it's an area where they have some room for improvement, and so they want to focus specifically on that session. But I also introduced a membership opportunity for the rest of 2026. So that means that every single call you will be able to attend. I will automatically register you for those calls, and you're going to get a discount. So you're going to get one call for free. So rather than the $20 per call for 7 calls, you're going to get that same content for 120. Regardless, whether you sign up for the membership or you sign up per session, you will always get the recording of the session, so that if you are on the road, you're at a rodeo, you're at volleyball practice, like whatever other commitments you have, because we all know as rodeo queens, we're not just doing one thing. We have families and parents and siblings and like other extracurriculars we're doing. You will always get the call, so you get the content if you are signing up. So if you want to join that, here's the QR code where you can join, or you can go to projectpageantry.com/learning and find that content so you can sign up. Questions? Here's where you can find me. I'm guessing if you registered for this, you already follow me on socials, so at projectpageantry.com. If you want information about the handbook and want to purchase that or get that, you can go to projectpageantry.com. You'll find it in the drop down at the top. If you're interested in joining the academy, I'm going to keep membership open through the first call, or the first call in the series, but the next call, because this is the first one, which will be June 6th. They're going to be on Saturday mornings each month. That will close June 6th. So you have an opportunity to join the academy until June 6th. And then thereafter, it'll be one-off pricing. For coaching, you can email me at projectpageantry@gmail.com. And remember, we're here to build confidence. We're here to build communication skills, and we're here to build presence. Whether you are an adult doing this for a living, whether you are on to the next chapter of your journey or not, you will leave ready to take on the world in and out of the arena. Thank you for joining, and I hope to see you on the next call.